Today I want to show you a project that I have had on my mind for a long time, and I've been working on, I guess, for a few weeks now. Maybe more than that if you count how long ago I actually ordered the fabric. Anyways, when we first moved into this house, it's a nice house. It's a lovely little 1930s house. I wanted to fill it with, a few easy to obtain cheap antiques rather than going to IKEA and buying a bunch of stuff new. We got this beautiful dining table, kind of Regency reproduction, something like that, for very cheap. Then I wanted some chairs to match. Well, I went all kinds of places online looking at antique dealers, furniture dealers, furniture restorers, eBay, all kinds of things. And I found that there was this massive difference between, getting kind of a full set of 8 or 10 fully restored chairs that was like thousands and thousands of pounds, or getting a couple of, close to but not completely matching sets off of eBay, which altogether I got these 8 chairs for, I think it was a little over £100. So massive difference there. Even with the cost of all of the fabric and all the time that I'm putting into this, this was actually a very cost-effective way to go to order chairs that, they weren't perfect, but I mean, you could sit in them. We've been sitting in them for the last 18 months. And it's only now that I've happened to have the money for getting all the fabric and the time to actually kind of work on it, that I'm getting them sorted out. And I'm really excited to show you, all the changes that I'm making to kind of make my dining room, come together as a really cohesive, nice space. But to start out, so I got 4 chairs that are kind of like this, and you can see the before and the after of the upholstery project that I'm doing. These ones, especially the yellow, they were really stained, and they're not that nice. There's the foam has really gone out of them, so they're not very comfortable to sit in for a long time. And now with the with the new thicker foam on it, it's much more comfortable to sit in. After dinner, we're much happier to kind of sit and talk for longer sitting on these chairs, which is important to have that family time and sit around and enjoy each other's company for a bit longer. And then this other set of chairs, you can see, the slight difference between the two types of chairs. These are slightly taller. Kind of the stain is a bit more mahogany. That's a bit more walnut. I may at some point strip these chairs down, the wood itself, and try to restain them to match these more. At this point, it's not a huge priority to me. It may come about at some other time, and I'll definitely film it if I do. But for right now, these are the other chairs. They're slightly more comfortable. There's a slightly bigger seat to them. But again, it's by stripping off the old fabric and the foam, putting in some new foam and some new fabric. They are more comfortable to sit in. And these chairs, they're slightly different in the way that they're made. So I'll see if I can show you that. And of course, these things don't match. So I found some fabric in a local shop, and I found a set of fabrics of stripes and damask and several different kind of prints that are all in this kind of pale blue and cream color. And so I've started recovering all of the dining chairs in this fabric, and then I'll also show you later the window seat and how I've done that to kind of coordinate with everything else. So this for me is the first time I've ever tried to do any kind of reupholstery of anything in my life. It's been very much a big learning experience. So I'm going to walk you through kind of all the little steps that I took, how I kind of went about choosing what to do and how I kind of got the confidence to know what I'm doing, and even how I've made some of the mistakes along the way, to kind of reassure you that if you have ever thought about doing something like this yourself, you can. It's not as hard in reality as it was in my mind. It's just taking a lot longer time. So I hope you enjoy this, and yeah, let's get started. I started by removing the old fabric from the chairs, which mostly involved sitting and pulling out hundreds of staples over the course of hours. I didn't film a whole lot of it because really it just took many days and weeks going through all 8 chairs to get all of the staples out. I did most of the chairs kind of one by one. And yeah, this was probably the biggest part of the project, was just taking apart the old chairs. The red chairs, the red striped chairs, were much easier to do than the yellow. They were just much simpler construction, just like a plywood piece of board with some foam on top and fabric stapled over it. Whereas the yellow striped chairs had all of these layers of webbing and plastic and different kinds of padding, and it was just all a lot more complicated. Right, at this stage I have removed the fabric from this chair frame. You can see that we have a very old, worn out foam on the top, and then underneath there's a layer of webbing, and then in between the webbing and the foam is a layer of plastic. So I'm just going to rip this foam off. There's this kind of, what do you call this? Insulation something in between. And then here we have a bunch of stapled down bits. Now I've tried several different ways to get staples out, and what I found works best for me is this little small flathead screwdriver. I think this is something that I use on sewing machines, and it just works really well at getting right underneath all of these old staples and getting them out. It's very interesting how they've done this webbing. They've stapled it across and then folded it over and stapled it again. I have elected to leave out the layer of plastic. I just don't think it's necessary. It was just, you know, one more supply I would have had to buy, and it's plastic, and I just, what am I even needing that for? I don't know. So I've done kind of a whole row of staples here, and I'm just going to go and pull them out with my pair of needle nose pliers. And you want to be especially careful, if you drop any, to pull them out of the carpet right away. Because you don't want your family members coming along and stepping on old, rusty staples. It's not very nice for them. And now we have another row of seemingly superfluous staples. Now you'll see when I get to the point of putting new webbing on, I'm not going to use nearly as much webbing, nearly as many staples. And, you know, who knows? Maybe somebody will fall through my newly reupholstered chairs because I don't know what I'm doing and I've decided to skip steps. I guess we'll find out. I'm going to keep doing this, and I'll come back to you when it's all done. Once I had a sample of each chair's fabric, I was able to create a pattern for each of the 2 different types of chairs. So I took some old butcher paper that I had and traced around the existing fabric in order to create the patterns. Then you can see here I fold it in half in order to check that the pattern that I have is symmetrical. I've got all the lines marked on this fabric, although I've learned from doing the last chair that I really didn't save enough room for certain corners. So I'm going to go outside those lines a little bit and allow myself a little bit more space throughout this. I'm going to just double check that it looks like the stripes are all lined up so that when I mean, obviously, if you're using kind of a busy floral pattern, it won't matter. But if you're using pattern with any kind of regularity like stripes, you're going to want to look at exactly where they fall on the seat. You know, if you're a perfectionist like that, I don't know. But yeah, I'm happy that my stripes are pretty well lined up. And I can cut this very expensive fabric. I always get nervous cutting this fabric. Doesn't matter how many times. Because I spent a lot of money on it. I say a lot. It's fabric is just a pricey thing. So I'm going to give myself quite a bit more space. One thing I learned through the course of this was not to cut too deep at the corners initially. But actually leave more fabric there rather than less, because it's much easier to trim something down than to try to fix it if it's cut too deep to begin with. That's the thing about a learning experience. You kind of go along and maybe the first one gets a bit messed up, but by the time you've done it 3 or 4 times, you sort of know what you're doing. Okay, at this stage I have completed the new webbing on this particular chair frame, and the next step is to attach the foam. So the tools that I need are obviously the chair frame. The foam, I just went online and Googled something like upholstery foam. They sell it in different thicknesses. I measured the thickness of the foam that was already on the chairs and decided that 1 inch would be more than sufficient to my needs. And given how comfy the chairs that I've finished are, I think that this is fine. 1 inch is good for dining chairs. If you're working on something like, you know, a couch or something a bit more plush, you might want it to be thicker than 1 inch. But yeah, this worked pretty well for me. In addition to the foam, I have some spray adhesive to help attach it to the chair. I have my little flathead screwdriver, which is always good for prying off stubborn staples anytime they come along. Also needle nose pliers for prying off staples. I've got my staple gun, extra staples to go in the staple gun, and then of course a nice cutter to cut the foam. And I've got a little bit of paper to put down, so when I actually go to use the spray glue, that I'm not actually spray gluing anything I'm not supposed to. I've got a little bit of paper to put down to protect all of my precious things. So we'll start with this. I just kind of lay down the frame, get it kind of straight. Now with this particular frame, I'm going to want the foam to kind of bend over the front a little bit. So I'm going to give it a lot of space on the end near the front part. Probably, what does that look like? About 2 inches, maybe a little bit more. And then the last time I cut this, I left a pretty large margin, and I wound up having to trim it down. So this time I'm going to only do about like 1 centimeter or ½ an inch of space around the rest of the piece. So I just kind of do this by eye. I use the frame itself as my guide. If you're a perfectionist, then you're not like me. I'm definitely no perfectionist. I've always had trouble drawing anything in a straight line. So this isn't perfect, but it doesn't have to be because, well, it's all going to be covered up by fabric anyways. I think that should be good. I've got the basic kind of cut out now. Now the blade didn't go all the way through 1 inch, so I'm just going to find my lines and cut it down where it needs to be cut. And try not to get my fingers, if that's at all possible. I've always wanted to have a nice grown-up dining room. This dining table, it was the first real dining table I've had, I think, in my adult life. I've always lived in these tiny little apartments where I didn't even have like a space to eat. I would always just sit on a chair or on a couch and eat off my lap. So it's very exciting to have like a big grown-up dining room and be able to furnish it the way that I want. And you know, I don't have a massive budget. I can't just go around flinging money everywhere. So I try to look for used things, things that can be reused, that come to me a lot cheaper than new, and which also makes me feel pretty good because then I'm not doing everything new. I'm you know, doing my bit as far as reusing and recycling and upcycling. So that's important to me too. Now, when it comes to kind of fitting the fabric and everything around the chair, you're going to want the corners to actually be cut out. So I'm going to cut notches into each of these corners to take those parts out. Now I have just kind of a sense from looking at it of how big it's going to be. I'm going to cut about a ½ an inch or 1 centimeter corner out of each corner. There we go. Get rid of that. Now I realize, you know, it's not completely reusing and upcycling because I did have to do things like buy new foam. Yeah, I don't know how to get around that. I still want chairs that are comfy to sit on. I didn't want to use the old foam. And you'll see when this all gets wrapped around and glued and stapled down what I'm talking about here. Take some more out. Now I might just be doing something terrible right now and ruining this, but I'll find out in a minute. As I said, I put a bit of paper down. This is just a bit of paper, something that was delivered to me was wrapped in it. So I reuse it a lot when I just kind of need to put something down to protect whatever is underneath. And get my spray glue here. It actually doesn't say that I need to shake, so I don't need to shake, apparently. Yeah, spray it on the foam itself, and then I can place the chair frame up from above. So I'll go. Right, lovely. Get that just so, whoops, not quite. No, no, I'm ruining it. Here we go, here we go, here we go. There, okay. Got it kind of glued on. Bada bing. Slightly awkward next step is that, see, I've got this extra lip of foam that's got to bend over onto the lip of the chair. This just happens to be because of this particular chair frame, and I'll show you on the other chair frame that it's quite a bit different and a lot easier than this one. I'll just go kind of like this and just sort of squeeze it on. It's not going to stay on. I'm going to have to staple it down. So just kind of, yep, come up and do that. Right, there we have foam on a chair frame. That wasn't so bad, was it? The foam on the red striped chairs was much easier to do than that on the yellow striped chairs. Because it was just a simple plywood piece, I could simply spray it and glue it down, and there was just really no fuss or additional stapling or anything to be done. Now I've got my fabric all set out the way that I want it. I've got my chair frame placed, and I'm just going to go around and start stapling around. What I do is pull the fabric super, super tight so that it pulls the edges of the foam kind of up over the edge, just so that the foam kind of goes over that little corner, so that when you're sitting on the chair, you don't kind of catch like a hard corner of wood. Now this for me is the hardest part, just because my hand gets really tired of stapling after a while. And of course all of the pulling and tugging of the fabric, whilst at the same time trying not to make it look like it's pulled and tugged. This is a really good reason for getting like proper upholstery fabric and not trying to work with like a simple cotton or something like that if you're doing this, because you want something that's going to be pretty hardcore to pull and tug on it and not lose its shape. So here this happens a lot. I have a staple that just goes wrong and has to be pulled out. So I have a massive pile of staples over here that went wrong. I forgot to mention before, I keep a little hammer on hand that if a staple doesn't go in entirely, I can give it a little pat down. And here you can see that I staple pretty much regularly all the way around, and I'm going to do that all the way around this entire thing, including the front bit here. And I'll show you when I get to the end. I have done most of the staples all the way around. As you can see, well, I I don't know if this is going to show up perfectly, but there's staples pretty close all the way around. The fabric is pulled quite tight and is nice and even on the surface that people are actually going to see. I didn't need to worry too much about the lines left by the fabric pencil, as they're all going to be underneath and not visible anyways. Now, I've left extra fabric in order to finish off the corners because on one of the previous seats that I didn't leave enough, and I actually have a little hole in a visible space on one of the chairs. But of course it's so small, it's something I think only I can see, but it is always going to bother me. Now I'll demonstrate doing the corners, and this is why I took the notch out of the foam in each of the corners, is so that the fabric can come up easily and not get too bunched around anything. Kind of stretch it, hold it nice and tight. Get it that way, and that way, and then just fold that corner up and over, and pin down the excess fabric. Right, so that's that corner done. And here's the last corner. It's a little bit complicated just around the shape of this particular seat. But as I go along and I practice more and more, I'm getting the hang of it bit by bit. So I'll take some excess fabric there and just kind of fold it over at 45-degree angles and pin it over the edges with the staple gun. I've got it pinned all the way into this little ridge here. It's not perfect, but this is all the bits that nobody is going to see. And I'm sure I will soon forget about. Now the next step will be to put in just a bit of kind of lining fabric over this to make it look a bit nicer, which is kind of silly because this is a bit that you're never going to see. But first I will test it out on the chair frame itself. Okay, chair frame. Pop that down in. Make sure it fits properly in the frame as it's supposed to. Come on. Might need to sit on it just to... Ooh, and it is really quite comfortable. Possibly even better than the last one. So here we go. Chair, oh no, it's not sitting properly. So I will have to figure that out. Okay, so I mentioned that I've never done this before, and what I'm going to talk about now is a very good example of that. I noticed that one of the chairs that I thought I had completed, it looked all lovely, and it's been used for a couple of weeks, has actually broken through the bottom, and the things that are all supposed to be holding the seat in are not holding. So I'm going to need to take this all apart and restart it. This is just part of the learning process. It might result in I have to buy some extra materials and things like that. I don't know. I'm going to try to do what I can to salvage all this so that I don't have to buy more things. But this is a hazard of the learning process, and I want you all to know that I'm just as much of an amateur as anyone else. The only difference between me and anyone else is that I just give it a go and I try it, and I strongly encourage that for you as well. Is just, you know, take a reasonable risk and do what you can to do things yourself and become more resourceful. And every once in a while, things don't work out and you have to start over and try again. So here you have the finished product. I am so incredibly proud of these chairs. I can't even tell you. This is the result of a very long process, undertaken over months. Of course, the irony of it was that I wanted to have a nicer space to entertain people, and I actually finished this project in the very early months, I think in March when lockdown first started. So, of course, ironically, I have this wonderful entertaining space and these matching chairs just in time to not be allowed to have anyone come over. But it's all good. I'm really happy with the results, and I would love to hear from you if you ever try to undertake a project like this. Please, do leave me a comment or a like or any link to whatever else that you have been doing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.